Dear friends, welcome to today's session. So in today's session, we will be talking about the types of constructors in Java. So in my previous video, we have talked about what constructors are, what are the rules of making a constructor, writing a constructor, and why we need constructors. We also saw with an example that what happens if we do not use constructors, and how we can minimize the number of codes and make the codes reusable using constructors. Okay, so let us get started. So talking about the different types of constructors, in Java there are three types of constructors. The first one is the default constructor. So we'll talk about one. There are three different types of constructors, so we will talk about them one by one. So the first one is the default constructor. Now default constructor, as the name suggests, it is by default. Okay, that means, let us say, if you are not writing any constructor or if you're not creating any constructor, then the compiler will be creating a constructor on its own. Okay, now this compiler, the constructor which is created by the compiler, is basically a no argument constructor. That means it does not have any argument, so it is a no argument constructor, and it is created by the compiler. You might get a question saying that whether the default constructor is created by the JVM or the compiler. So you should be very much careful that it is not by the JVM, but it is created by the compiler. Now let us just look at an example. Okay, so I will declare a class. So class example, and then I'll open the class body. Within this I will have public static void main string argument s. Okay, so string argument s, and I have declared this main method inside which I will be writing a piece of code. Now here I will create an object. Let's say example e is equal to new example. So as soon as I create this particular object, the default constructor will be called if I have not mentioned any constructor, or if I have not created any constructor in this program. Okay, so the default constructor will be created by the compiler from its own end. Okay, so this looks something like this. However, it will not be visible to you in course of a program, but the compiler generally creates it in this form. Let's say example, and within this is the constructor body. So this is the body of the constructor. So the constructor body is written here, and as soon as this particular object is created, it will simply be calling the constructor. This particular constructor would be invoked. Okay, inside this default constructor we can use the super method. Okay, so now we will not talk about super here. We will talk about super sometime later in the later videos in detail. So we have to understand that whenever this object is created, this default constructor would be created by the compiler if we have not mentioned any or if we have not created any constructor. Okay, but this will not be visible to you in your program. This will be created at the back end. All right, and you can we will see through a program how we can actually find out the value of the object that has been created, how we will be how the initial values of this particular object would be displayed. So we will see this in a program. As of now, you just have to remember that whenever we are creating an object and we are not mentioning any constructor anywhere here, okay, in the program, the default constructor would be created. All right, and this default constructor is created by the compiler. Fine. So the next type of constructor that we will be discussing is a no argument constructor. So default constructor is also a no argument constructor, and no argument constructor also do not has argument. That means this is also a no argument constructor, but this no argument constructor is basically user defined. The previous one was created by the compiler itself. Here the no argument constructor is a user defined constructor which do not support any type of arguments. Now let us see this with a program. So we will be creating the same class example, okay, and within this I will be creating the constructor which has the same method name, okay, as that of the class name, and I will be simply opening the body of the constructor. Again, after that I will be using a public static void main, a main method, void main string argument s, and within this I will be creating the object of the class. So suppose I am creating example e is equal to new example. So when I am doing this, then also on creating of this particular object, then also this particular constructor could be invoked, okay. This particular constructor which do not have any argument can be invoked, and within this we can use any particular method or any particular printf statement or any particular operation that we want to do. However, this has a similar representation, but the only difference between a default constructor is that you have to explicitly create this particular constructor. That means within the program itself you have to explicitly construct or explicitly create this constructor, okay. And now this also we will be seeing in a program, okay. So now we will be looking at the third type of constructor, which is known as the parameterized constructor. So this we have already seen in my previous video, okay. So but still we will be looking at it, parameterized constructor, and as the name suggests, this parameterized constructor will be having certain parameters into it, okay. So we will be able to pass parameters inside this constructors, okay. So let me give you the same example, okay. Class student, and when we are doing this class student, the body of the class would be created, and I will be declaring the main method here, okay. So public static void main, public static void main string args, and within this I will be creating the object and also passing the parameters, okay. So the constructor that would be created is student, and let me rub this and do it properly. So student, and then I will be opening the parameterized constructor here. Now since I am talking about parameterized constructor, essentially this parameters needs to be passed within this constructor. So what I'll do is I'll simply make space here to pass my parameter. Now from the main method, I will be creating an object of the example class E is equal to new example, and within this I will be passing the, let's say, name of the student as Pat. Okay, so here, in order to pass this particular value or initialize this constructor or initialize this object, I have to create a string variable which is of name, so that this name can be sent over to here. Okay, and I will be working with this particular constructor in whatever way I feel like. Okay, with this particular value of the name in whatever way I feel like. So we do not have to use any such dot operator calling the constructor and then something like this. We do not have to do this kind of statements here. Okay, we simply have to pass the parameter right at the time of creation of the object and initialize it at the same time. Sorry, this got rubbed off. Okay, so initialize it at the same time, so that the value of this particular variable gets passed as the parameter. Okay, so here we have seen three different types of constructors. The first one is the default constructor, where we do not create any constructor and it is created by the compiler and it is invoked whenever we create an object of it. The second is the no argument constructor. It is a user defined constructor. We have to explicitly mention the constructor or create the constructor here. Okay, and the third type is the parameterized constructor, where we can pass different parameters. So as and when we need maybe if we have a list of parameters, we can going on adding in this particular area. Okay, here in the argument list we can go on adding the parameters. Okay, so these are the three different types of constructors which are available in Java. Again, we have to remember that we are using constructors to initialize the objects and we are not creating the objects using these constructors. Okay, we will simply use it to initialize it. So we will see this with a small program in my next video.